Welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight for the live Q&A session that accompanies Lisa's tutorial that was just premiered, Finding the Melody in Your Score. My name is Mark Merkley, and I'm one of the moderators for tonight. I'm chair of the program committee and president of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers.
Hello, my name is Rob Cairns, and I'm going to be the other moderator for tonight. I am the vice president of OGEHR, and I am also the chair of the education committee.
Today's tutorial, Finding the Melody in Your Score, was produced by Lisa Kyriakides. But in addition to this tutorial, Lisa has actually produced 6 other tutorials for OGEHR, and these include getting started with a new piece of music, conducting the basics, how to mark your score efficiently, rehearsal techniques for conductors, how to recover from a train wreck, and choosing music for your ensemble. And we are so appreciative that Lisa has dedicated so much time to OGEHR this year by producing the tutorials and also by hosting the Q&A sessions, including tonight's.
Lisa enjoys a busy and varying career as a conductor, clinician, performer, and a musical director. She also directs 2 3-octave choirs at Aurora United Church. As well, she performs with the church's quintet called EmBellished. Lisa is also a member of the Bronze Foundation and is currently the Central Area Rep for OGEHR. Most recently, Lisa has been elected as the secretary of the newly formed Handbell Musicians of Canada. So at this point, I think we will turn to our chat questions. And Marg, if you want to start out with the first question.
Yeah, I've got a question, Lisa. You talked a lot about each individual ringer finding the melody and playing the melody. But are there ways to create a uniform sounding melody with all the ringers playing together?
Yeah, so that's what we're striving for. And that's probably one of, I would say, one of the top 5 challenges of bell ringers, because you've got 11, 12, 13 people who are trying to sound like one thing, right? One instrument. So if you have 3 or 4 or 5 people involved in a melody, once you've identified that you are part of that and you know which notes they are, you're looking to create uniformity, and you can create uniformity in lots of ways. So you can create it in the volume that you're playing. You can create it in the attack that you have, whether it's whether it's a nice smooth attack or it's a bit of a sharper attack. You can create uniformity in your choreography as well. So if you're all doing the same gestures, whether they're quick or whether they're nice and smooth, and you can look at your neighbor who's also playing the melody, like where are they playing, how far did they go out. And also, every melody has a shape, just like every story kind of has a shape, and melody has a shape. It usually has a climax somewhere. And so you want to make sure that you are cognizant of where you lie in that shape, and feed off your neighbor. So it's really some communication, because it's usually the people are right around you. Like you're not going to be playing the melody in position 9 and somebody else is playing in position 2. It's going to be the people 9, 10, 11, 8, 9, 10 something. It's going to be the people around you. So you want to take, and you have to make split-second decisions, because you need to take what your neighbor is giving you as part of the melody and work within that as well. So there's lots you can do to make it sound uniform, and that is the ultimate goal, right? Make it sound like only one person is playing the melody.
I have a question here, and I'll do a little follow-up after, because it falls into this question. There was a part of the video that really spoke to me, something which I didn't really think about, but I'll give you the question first. Why do ringers who don't play the melody need to know where the melody is?
Yes, good question. Because melody is one of the organizational factors of a piece. So a melody, when you think about a melody, if you have a lay person who knows nothing about music, then probably they would describe melody as the thing that they can sing, or the thing that gets stuck in their head. They would call it the tune, right? That's what people call them. And melodies are organizational structures in pieces. And so we want to make sure that that we are always highlighting that melody wherever it goes, whatever happens to it, however it changes, as a way to organize the piece. So if you're not playing that melody, then obviously you're playing harmony and you are a supporting character, and you have to figure out, how do I play in relation to what's happening in that melody. And so if you're playing a different technique, and a lot of it has to do with volume, but a lot of it also has to do with attack, and the way your choreography. And then again, also, if you know you're not melody, and then you also know that the two people on either side of you are not melody, then you know that you guys are playing together. You're doing something as a unit that's just as important, and you need to work as a unit, just like the people playing the melody need to work as a unit.
The part that I was going to follow up with, the part that really spoke to me, was when you were talking about doubling. When we think about doubling, we often think about like sixes and then being doubled up into sevens. But you also pointed out a section of a piece where you had the melody in the sixes, but it was doubled in the fives. So it was buried in the battery. And to me, that really spoke to me, because I actually didn't think that much about that kind of doubling when you're bringing out a melody, but it's right there. It's just so, as I said, buried right in the battery of the bells. But it is something which you could really pay attention to, and bring that out.
Yes, and it would be very easy to miss as that battery ringer, like in that example I gave where it's very chordal and they're big fat chords. It would be very easy, you think, oh, the melody's at the top. I'm not melody, and it would be very easy to miss it, like for everybody. Yeah, that's why it's really super important to know, because if you know where the melody is, then you understand if you're doubling it.
Yeah, so all of you directors out there, pay attention to that part.
Lisa, you probably addressed this a little bit with your answer to the first question, but why is it so important for the audience to really hear that melody?
So I always think about pianists, because they amaze me, because they're doing the whole piece all by themselves. And a pianist will be playing a ton of notes, there's a flurry of stuff going on, but yet you'll hear those melody notes coming out a little bit stronger, a little bit louder, a little bit more accented, so that even though there's a ton of arpeggios or things going on, you'll always hear that melody. And I think part of our job as performers is to help the audience, how do I put this, sort of not really understand the form of the piece, but have a sense of the form of the piece. So most pieces, when you think about them, they're organized in some form of what we call ABA. So you have the A section, something happens there, maybe it's fast and rhythmic. Then you have the B section, and it's slow and melodic, and chimes are in there. And then you go back to the A section. And so part of our job is, if we're highlighting the melodies, then the listener can latch on to those things, and they can be like, especially when you get to the return of the A section, they can be like, oh, right, I know that. I've heard that before. They might not think that, but they would, internally understand that. And there's some relief in that ABA, like, oh, I've returned to something that I already know before. So I think we're guiding the audience and helping them see the form. And if the melody is just buried and nobody is highlighting it, then there's a lack of structure for the audience and a lack of feeling like, oh, this is cool. Oh, I've heard this before. Oh, this is the return of this thing. Even if they're not thinking it consciously, they can think it subconsciously. So I feel like it leads to some enjoyment. I think further enjoyment for the audience. Like if you think of a pianist who plays a bazillion notes, if it's just a bazillion notes that all sound the same, it might be impressive, but it's not going to have that real connection to you that you need as a listener.
There's a comment in the chat section, which I'll just give to you. It says, "Thank goodness for Lisa, who tells us in our choir if one of our notes happens to be melody so that we can play it appropriately." And so it's really good. Like you do actually have to point out where that happens so that the person knows and can bring it out for the audience. I have a question of my own to pose to you. Have you ever come across a piece that doesn't have a melody?
In bell music?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, my answer would be no.
I would say I've seen sections within pieces, like you might be doing a bridge or something like that, where you could basically consider it equal. And I know in choral music, there will be certain types of music where you want everything to be represented equally. Yes. So there might be sections within a piece, but
not a whole piece. I agree. There's not always melody, because there's often, there's a melody, then there's a bridge to a different section, then there might be a second melody, and then there's a bridge, and then there might be a modified first melody. And it's not melody every single moment of every piece.
That's probably a good thing to know, because as a player, you do want to know when the melody is, but you probably also want to know when there isn't melody, so that you are all playing equally to bring out, in essence, I guess, the texture of the piece or the harmonies of the piece at that point.
Yes, and at that point, it's often bridges or key changes or, return to the A section or something. So often there's maybe a part in the music that you want to bring out actually a bit more to help with that transition, whether it be the person who leads you into the key change or the person who leads you into the return of the melody or something. So
I was going to say key changes are critical, because there's always that one key note somewhere in the chord which is going to be making the transition. So that's not a melody, but it is a key thing which you do want to bring out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Lisa, I think we have time for one more question, and it really, again, is a segue from the ringer that you have in your choir that addressed the fact that they're so appreciative of you pointing out the melody. And as a ringer, I'm so appreciative when my director indicates where the melody is too. How do you recommend that we actually mark the melody in our score?
So I am a firm believer of marking as a general rule, but marking in moderation. So I would say the only time you need to mark your score is if it's a time when you would not expect it to be a melody note. So if it's, if you're in the treble clef and it's up there at the top and it's the melody, unless you want to put a big M or something just to remind yourself. I do think, though, that there are those instances, and Rob alluded to it, when it's buried in the chord because it's an octave double, or particularly for those people who might be in the battery or, maybe in the lower trebles or the upper bass, where the melody suddenly moves into their part. And a couple of the examples I had in the music indicated that, where it even moved into a different clef. So you might be playing along, and I think one of the examples I gave was, somebody was playing middle C. The first middle C was harmony, the second middle C was melody, and the third middle C was harmony again. So in that case, I would just circle it or put an M on it. Or, I firmly believe that people should mark scores to what makes sense to them. So for me, just a little circle would totally make sense. I would understand that would be something I would, need to emphasize. But if you wanted to play M or something. Just don't write, this is a melody note, try to play it louder. You got to be brief. But I think if it's an obvious thing, you maybe don't need to mark it, because you do want to keep your scores as clean as possible and not have so much to read that you can't cope. But certainly if it's something where you're in the middle of playing harmony and all of a sudden you've got 3 notes that are melody that come out of the middle of nowhere, you need some guidance and some preparation for that. So you definitely need to do something to mark your score.
We do have a little follow-up to that question in the chat. When you say highlight or bring out the melody notes, as a general rule, are you basically talking about volume?
Not always, no. I would say volume can be a major player in that, especially if you want the melody to be heard above the harmony. But it goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning about how you need to know what the other melody players, what you guys have agreed on or your director has instructed you to do, and how to play that melody. So is it louder? Is it different choreography? Is it a different attack? And again, where are you in the shape of that melody? But also if you are in the example I was just giving, like if you're a battery player and suddenly you have melody notes and they're really buried in there, then I would say you're probably going to have to play. Your conductor is going to encourage you to play a little bit louder, only for the fact that the battery notes can get they can get covered up because they're not in the outside ranges of the sound. So they can get a bit muddled in the middle. And so sometimes you do have to just play it a little bit louder. And I don't know about your bells, but I find sometimes with our bells, there are certain bells themselves that need just a little more oomph behind them to be heard, particularly right sort of around the middle C up to G kind of area. So I would say louder is definitely a component, but not the only thing that you're looking for.
This has been such an important topic, I think, Lisa, for you to have done a tutorial on, because melody is important with any type of music, but I think particularly as a group effort, yes, knowing about the melodies is very important for all of us. So
well, bell ringers can be very, they have the blinders on and I'm just playing my part. I'm just playing my part. Here I go. I got my F and G. Here I go, and they don't look at what's going on around them. And that's a skill you have to develop, and that comes with confidence, but it also comes from your leader helping you with that. I mean, my ringers who are here will attest to the fact that sometimes I say, who's got the melody notes? And some of them look at me like I haven't a clue. So, I'm like, okay, I understand. You don't understand. Let's look at where the melody is, because it's not so obvious right now to you. Yeah. So super important thing for people. And I think it can make a piece go from a certain level of competency and enjoyment to the next level.
Right. Well, thank you for hosting this portion of the Q&A session.
Please mark Saturday, April 24th on your calendars and plan on being part of OGEHR's next handbell tutorial session. Our guest clinician will be Debbie Sproul, who will be presenting a tutorial on how can the music lending library help you as a director or a ringer. We encourage you and your fellow bell ringers to attend. The music lending library is a great resource for all OGEHR members.
On behalf of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers, I would like to thank Lisa in particular for her wonderful tutorial and for hosting the Q&A session, and for everybody who watched the premiere and was part of this Q&A session. Thank you.